Duck Takes Charge is the 8th episode of the second series and is based on the story of the same name from the Railway series book, Percy the Small Engine. This is one of those huge landmarks for the series because it introduces us to another fan favourite, Duck the Great Western Engine. Let's go over the story. One day in the sheds, Percy is eager to tell Gordon and James some news. Both quickly tire of Percy's usual manner, and the tank engine tells them that as the work in the yard is getting too hard for him, the Fat Controller is planning to bring a new bigger engine to help. James scoffs and tells Percy that if he spent more time working and less time talking, the yard would be a happier place. Percy then leaves to do his work. As he works, Percy is grumbling to himself about how the larger engines see him as a silly little engine, ever since he misunderstood a signal and went backwards instead of forwards. Percy wants to teach them a lesson, but doesn't know how to do it. He works very hard all day, and by the afternoon he is worn out. After bringing some express coaches to the station, he sees the Fat Controller on the platform, who notes that Percy looks very tired, which Percy confirms. The Fat Controller consoles Percy by telling him that the new engine is bigger than him and can probably manage the work alone. He then asks Percy if he would like to help Thomas build his new harbour, to which Percy happily agrees straight away. Soon the new engine arrives. The Fat Controller asks the engine his name, and the engine introduces himself as Montague, but tells the Fat Controller he is often called Duck due to his supposed waddle. Although he does not believe that he actually does waddle, he admits to liking Duck better than Montague. With that, the Fat Controller agrees that the new engine will be known as Duck. Percy arrives and the Fat Controller asks him to show Duck around. Duck does his work quietly as he brings some coaches to the station, leading Gordon, James and Henry to decide to boss him around just like they do with Percy. Gordon and Henry then start to leave the station on either side of Duck, quacking and blowing steam at him. Percy sees everything and is cross about it. Duck takes no notice and just wants to wait until the larger engines get tired of their teasing. Duck then asks Percy if the larger engines boss him around, and Percy confirms that they do. Duck decides to take charge and put a stop to it and tells Percy what they will do. That afternoon, the Fat Controller is sitting at his desk looking forward to having hot buttered toast for tea when he suddenly hears a horrible commotion coming from the yard. Looking out of his window, he sees Percy and Duck blocking the turntable and preventing an enraged Gordon, James and Henry from entering the sheds. The Fat Controller grabs his hat and rushes to the yard. At the sheds, Gordon, James and Henry are furiously wheezing and whistling loudly when the Fat Controller arrives and demands silence before demanding an explanation from Duck and Percy. Duck politely explains that as a Great Western engine, he prefers to do his work without any fuss, but wants the other engines to know that he and Percy only take orders from the Fat Controller. As the three larger engines start whistling angrily again, the Fat Controller silences them. He then tells Duck and Percy that he is pleased with their work that day, but not with their behaviour that night, as they have caused a disturbance. Gordon, Henry and James snigger at Percy and Duck's dilemma, but the Fat Controller turns back to the three larger engines and reprimands them too, as their actions have been much worse. He declares that they made the disturbance by ordering the two tank engines around and that Duck is right. That this is his railway and he is the one who gives the orders, not them. With that, the three engines quickly fall back into line. When Percy is sent to work at the harbour on Thomas's line, Duck is left to do the work alone, something he manages with ease. The episode, as I mentioned, introduces us to Duck the Great Western Engine, a fan favourite among the Thomas community. He knows how to hold his own and tends to stand for no nonsense from any engines that might have ideas about their station and try to order him and others around.
Beg pardon, sir, but I'm a Great Western engine. We do our work without fuss, but begging your pardon, sir, Percy and I would be glad if you would inform these engines that we only take orders from you.
As a result of this and his strength, most tank engines look up to him. Duck tends to talk about the Great Western Way, and how that's one of the only ways to do things, that and the wrong way. But he's also a very kind, hard-working engine, and stands for no nonsense from any engines. And I think it's really nice and interesting to see a more cheeky side of Gordon, James and Henry rather than their usual boastful selves, as they've been said to order Percy about in the yards. And it's super hilarious how they make fun of Duck when they first meet him. And Sir Ringo Starr just really gives it his all when he does Gordon and Henry making fun of Duck with quacking and wheezing noises. It's just something that I could re-listen to all day and never get tired of. And that bit where Gordon, James and Henry stop outside the sheds to see Duck and Percy blocking the turntable, refusing to let them in. Those sound effects Ringo Starr does is quite hilarious too. I have no idea what that last sound effect was meant to represent, but all I know is it's funny as hell. The episode is also one of those rare occasions where Ringo Starr really does shout at the top of his lungs for a particular line. Well, 2 lines actually, and those 2 lines being from the Fat Controller. There's just so much oomph in his voice compared to the last series, and it's great to listen to when you rewatch this episode, especially after hearing Duck's point of view on the situation at the end.
Stop that noise! Bellowed the Fat Controller. They won't let us in, hissed Gordon. Duck, explain this behaviour. Beg pardon, sir, but I'm a Great Western engine. We do our work without fuss. But begging your pardon, sir, Percy and I would be glad if you would inform these engines that we only take orders from you. Silence! Snapped the Fat Controller.
Sir Ringo deserves an Oscar for that. As well as being introduced to Duck, we're also introduced to his theme, which has become really popular among the Thomas community, being remade by almost every YouTuber who's ever been a fan of Mike O'Donnell and Jr. Campbell's music. And like every character theme, it really does show off Duck's personality, and it's just a grand sounding theme in my opinion. If you were to ask me if the Great Western Railway had a theme tune, then what would it be? Then I would definitely say this tune. Duck Takes Charge is the second part of the Percy saga throughout Series 2, and it's definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it for a while. It's a great introduction to Duck, it's a great further telling of Percy's personality and his story arc throughout the series, and it's just an all-around fun episode to watch. You'll get lots of entertainment out of it, and you'll get to hear a top-notch performance from Sir Ringo Starr.